bad.
What's up? What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Renz, also known as Ricky Varanus, and I'm back. I know we haven't been putting out episodes as much as you'd like, but I have tons of guests booked. I've been writing a lot of emails and talking to a lot of people, trying to fit them in my busy schedule and trying to have them fit me in their busy schedule, hoping that we can find a time that works for everybody and make it happen. And today, we have, let me just share a kind of an interesting and funny and fascinating story. So I do write a lot of emails throughout the day, and with work and kids and coaching and, you know, anybody who follows me on Instagram or Facebook, I mean, I don't post a whole lot, but you kind of get the feel that with sports and everything, I try to stay active, and I do not like downtime. So I usually don't have a lot of downtime. And sometimes due to being so busy and trying to do everything so quickly and do so much, I mess up. And I did a little bit of a mess up on this episode. I was emailing, and I don't know where I got Kurt's email, but we were emailing about scheduling, and I was probably in the process of going back and forth with like quite a few guests in my personal email inbox, trying to figure out when to fit a interview and a podcast chat. And I'm emailing back and forth with who I thought was Kurt Metzger, the comedian, and booked it, had a date, time, all this stuff. And then we're on the Zoom call. And there's been times in the past where I think with Roger Stone, with Mel K, you know, just different people that I've had on where when the Zoom call starts, for whatever reason, either because they're using somebody else's Zoom account or they don't know how to use that specific computer too well and they're having somebody help them, or they're out of the room and they just wanted to let me know that the person I want to talk to or I plan on talking to will be right back. But sometimes the Zoom call starts and it's not the person that I was planning on talking to. So that's kind of what I assumed. I was on the call and I'm like, "Hey, Kurt," and he's like, "Yeah, it's Kurt." And at the same time, I'm trying to process if I messed up or not. I'm just having some audio issues, hearing echo or whatnot in my headphones. And I'm like trying to process everything that's going on. I have this guest that doesn't look like the person that I thought I was talking to. I have this Pro Tools echoing issue that I'm constantly trying to resolve and was distracting. And then finally, when I realized that, oh boy, I messed up. Somehow I emailed the wrong Kurt Metzger, and I'm on a Zoom call with the wrong Kurt Metzger, and I prepared for the wrong Kurt Metzger, and yet he was so polite, he was so nice, and he's like, "Hey, if you got the wrong guy, no problem, I won't take it personally." And at this point, I feel really bad. I'm probably taking time out of his busy day. He can probably tell that I'm noticeably embarrassed that I messed up. So I proposed the idea of, let's just go ahead and have the conversation. What's the worst can happen? I'm a curious person. Worst case scenario, I don't post the podcast and it was just a mess up. I can laugh about it later. Every podcaster has some podcasts that they don't upload for whatever reason. That's never happened to me. First time for everything. But this is also the first time that I emailed the wrong person with the same name and end up being completely surprised when the Zoom call started. So I threw out my notes that were worthless because those notes about the wrong guy and the wrong life. But with the studio ready, why let it go to waste? I've already taken time out of my day, and he's taken time out of his day to have this chat. So let's just go ahead and have it. So we did. And come to find out, he is very fascinating. He just happened to be adopted by Roger Metzger, the famous Texan baseball player, which of course piques my interest. And he has pictures with Pete Rose, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and other famous baseball players from the area that he played with and against. And we go into all that, what made his dad the amazing player that he was, some of the influences he had on his life and whatnot. And it just ended up being a really fun and interesting conversation. He's also been in the restaurant business for a long time and shares his experience running restaurants and being in the industry and being Portuguese and someone who's always been around foreigners and married a woman who has also been around the restaurant business. I do have this appreciation for food, restaurants, and the community that those things build. So we do get into that also. Either way, I think what this podcast and this episode specifically teaches us is something that I already believe, that we all have stories, we all have fascinations and things that make us fascinating and interesting. And even what seems to be on the surface a average person who's living a average life has many more layers than meets the eye and is much more fascinating and has many more interesting perspectives than maybe you think. With that said, let me remind you, this is a value for value show. If you get any value out of the discussions I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. You can rate, review, tell people about the show, share the show on all the platforms you're on. My show is open source, so if you want to take any of the episodes you like and share it because you think it's important or fascinating, please do. But also rate, review, and subscribe to the Ripple Effect Podcast on all the video and audio podcast platforms. We're back on YouTube. As you know, we were banned off YouTube for a couple years during COVID. We're back on YouTube. We're also still on Rumble, BitChute, Minds, Odyssey, Band.video, and then of course the audio is available everywhere: iTunes, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and many more places. But if you are in a good financial situation and you can afford to give something back, please do, and there's plenty of ways of doing so. We have a Patreon page if you want to support us monthly. We have a PayPal account if you want to send a one-time donation. We have a Venmo account if you want to also do that. We have a merch store. You can go to therippleeffectpodcast.com or check in the show description to get to the merch store, or you can get directly to the merch store by going to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. We have new logos, new designs, hoodies, t-shirts, kids' clothes, and much more. Just check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. I also have new Theory 6 music, which we just came out with some new Theory 6 logos and designs, which some are already available on the merch store. But you can go into show description or on my website to find links directly to Theory 6 music. It's my solo music project. I have new music that now I'm releasing. If you like metalcore, if you like new metal, if you like electronic music, trance, any type of mixture of metal and electronic music, check out Theory 6 music. It is a hybrid of the two, and it's also available on all the audio music platforms. It's on Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, and also on many of the social media platforms. When you're adding music to a post, you can also find Theory 6 music there. The song Artificial Ripple is really been the top streaming song right now since I released 4 or 5 new songs. And then I have one more song that hopefully by the time you hear this, it's called The Lost Theory. Hopefully it's released. And once that song's released, I'm going to release the whole EP with all 6 new songs. And I'm going to call the EP The Artificial Ripple, because my last EP, which I released over 10 years ago, was called The Ripple Effect. And that's what influenced this podcast's name. And because the majority of the music that I'm releasing now, a lot of it's done on the computer, very little is actually done with physical instruments. I might record a little idea and then use it to generate some music, but the majority of it is on a computer. I'm going to call it Artificial Ripple. So look out for Artificial Ripple, which is the new EP, should be out very soon. And also look for The Lost Theory, the new song, which I'll actually premiere at the end of this podcast. So if you like the song The Lost Theory by Theory 6, search for it on all the streaming platforms and check out all my new songs. I have a new version of War for Peace, Sabotage the American Dream, and then also some completely new songs called Enough, which is a song using lyrics I wrote years ago, just lyrics that I always loved. So I'm glad I could bring them to life and use them in a song. And just like I said about the podcast, to follow and subscribe, please follow 36 Music on Spotify. So that way, every time there's new music, you'll be the first one to know. And finally, that's it. Keep a lookout for some upcoming shows with Ryan Christian from The Last American Vagabond, Robert Dew from InfoWars, Brad Brinkley from The Propaganda Report, Graham and Darren from Grimerica, and Stephen Bassett, who's been on a few times also. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the conversation. Peace.
Well, thanks for having me on. And if you were expecting a comedian, I'm not that guy. So
Maybe you are funny. Maybe they.
I wish I was, right? No, but no, I appreciate it. And yeah, I've been in the restaurant business almost my entire life, I think since 17, 18 years old, and grew up in the Houston area. And just to throw the first, no pun intended, curveball, but did grow up. I was born and raised adopted at 30 days old, and then probably adopted into one of the coolest, unique situations for me, which was I was adopted by the Houston Astros shortstop Roger Metzger back in the 70s. So I grew up kind of in a cool way. He played professional baseball for 10 years, and kind of neat. You think everybody's dad does that, right? And it was neat to watch him in his career. Of course, I was relatively young, but you watched him, hang out with some pretty impressive guys. And again, he's one of the most humble people on the face of the planet. So it's certainly now at 50 years old, I certainly look back on that nostalgia in a lot of different ways, and his humility, his humble nature towards the sport is definitely the way I look at it. But kind of decided to leave the Houston area and move to Dallas, and for a Texas boy. Uh, Dallas was the heartbeat of the restaurant industry back in the 90s for sure. I moved here in 95 and transferred with Brinker International, which of course at that time owned Macaroni Grill. And again, I'm definitely dating myself when it comes back to that time frame, but back then that concept was in its heyday. And it's pretty unbelievable to see where the restaurant industry has gone or come in these last for me, over 3 decades. And it's fascinating to see, in fact, where it's going and watching it evolve relatively quickly. But certainly at that time, I would have been waiting tables, and certainly have great respect for kids and even adults that make their money that way. At the same time, I felt like I wanted to continue to grow, and with Brinker's corporate office here in the Dallas area, certainly was lucky enough to meet some of the senior people in the restaurant business. And of course, again, it still is it's still a melting pot for any concepts out there trying to try new concepts, try new things, try new initiatives. For until recently when they went under, Fridays, TGI Fridays was here, Corner Bakery, a lot of the big brands, corporate offices are here. So certainly privileged enough to meet some of those folks and work my way up. And now overseeing in the vice president role a fantastic Dallas-based company that's been around since the 50s, and that's Norma's Cafe. And it's unbelievable to see the lines drawn and blended with tradition, with great comfort food, with the heartbeat of the Metroplex type of company that is tried and true. And that's what it's kind of fascinating to see that, right? And again, the post-COVID era for, I think, probably all industry, but the restaurant industry is something that we're still digging out of, right? If someone would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago, well, when did COVID end? When did the effects? You would say, well, we got back to business, so it was maybe 3 or 4 months after COVID. But the reality is, we're still digging out of it, right? And again, I don't know if this podcast will ever air or not, but I know there's a lot of folks in our industry that are really fighting, and you see some of these big giants who would have ever thought a TGI Fridays would crumble the way that it has? With respect, because I know that they've still got some of the airport locations out there operating, but I mean, who would have ever thought that, right? Who would have ever thought a Hooters, which I'm glad to see or hearing that they're maybe restructuring, which is fantastic because, regardless of our opinion of some of these brands, and I say it in my meetings to my team, it's like, when you stumble or when you fall, everyone's a Monday morning quarterback, right? Everyone has an opinion as to why that brand didn't work or why this didn't and didn't work or whatever. But when you're in the trenches trying to fight it out, whether you're a big brand like some of the ones I mentioned or a small mom and pop brand, I mean, this last 5 years has been unbelievable. And I'm sure it is for all industry, but definitely has played a major impact for the restaurant industry. And so yeah, it's a fight. It's a good fight. And so for me, it's an honor. You look back. I'll use P.F. Chang's as an example. I'll use Macaroni Grill as well. You know, 30 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. That's a good run. That's a good run for a restaurant company. That's a successful. Everyone's got made their money back. Everyone's made their investment back. And the company I'm working for is 7 decades old and growing. And that's borderline unheard of, right? And it's not just to speak to the individual company, but you've got brands that can make it that long. It says something, but even we're still doing it's every day is a new day, and yes, positively, but also you got to have the hustle to get out there and make it happen, especially in today's market.
Yeah, it's funny that we talk about 20 to 30 years people have made their investment back. Like, I mean, to survive that long, people don't, really think about it, but it's like restaurants, I mean, and just business owners in general, you are losing money for a huge percentage of, your business being, open and running. And
Correct.
you're just hoping you can survive and make it to the day where you're like in the positive and actually making profit.
Right.
It's so difficult. And it's funny because your story goes from being adopted from to a famous baseball player to in the restaurant business. Like, was there any sports in between that? Did he have any
Oh my
influence
Lord. I wish and I can assure you that skills in sports do not translate by name. So that's a bloodline thing. My brother who came along after I did, because the reason they adopted, they thought they couldn't have children or were told they couldn't have children. So they adopted me, which again, of course, is my life blessing. But then my little brother did come along naturally, and he could play baseball and actually could have gone quite far. He went to Baylor University down in Waco, Texas, and was a second baseman for them and did well. But no, the nameplate did not translate to any sports any sports for me.
and your dad
Um, I,
never like pushed it on you, or he was okay with whatever you love?
it goes back to that's a great question. It goes back to his humble nature and his humility. And I can only imagine the athlete in him watching me play, watching me strike out for the 100th time. I'm sure somewhere in there, but as the stoic athlete that he was, the professional that he was, and the humble individual that he was, that was never the way he presented himself in his life. And it was kind of cool too, because one thing I didn't mention, and if you have sports fanatics that follow your podcast, maybe they would already know this, but in 1979, 78, excuse me, the 79, my father cut the tips of his finger off in a power saw accident. So he played one more year in 1980 he was able to still throw. Obviously, it impacted his career, but he would have played into the mid 80s, maybe even early 90s had that not happened. And but it obviously it did at the end of his 10th year, he did retire. And one of the things you talk about as we get older, you know, I always in my growing up in the 80s and what were the rich go-go 80s, I was like, why isn't he out there managing? Why isn't he out there, because money was still could have been made, right? But I look back and I'm like, how would I have at 29, 30 years old taken it if his situation would have occurred to me and I would have had to walk away from how I made my money and all the things, all the tangible things, and for him to walk away so humbly, I know I would have been crying like a baby, right? Poor me. all those things that most people would do is I'm the victim. And it didn't occur to me until I was 45 years old that, like, what a class act for him to just walk away from his career and move on and move on with his life, where most people would be like, I'm poor me, I've lost my income, I've lost my way of life, I've lost all those things. That wasn't the way he handled it at all. He was a humble gentleman about it, and it says something, and it again made my respect grow for him even more. And it only took me to my 45th year to realize that those attributes were far greater than any Golden Glove or any MVP award or any even salaries in the 70s and in the early late 70s and 80s. I mean, it wasn't chump change, and that those things weren't important. It was the fact that he was able to just go on and live his life and be that humble guy that he always was. So yeah, definitely did not push the sports. I played, I enjoyed it, but those skills did not translate for sure.
Well, being a business owner and being successful in sports, it's not that different, really, in regards to like working with a team. That's why they actually say a lot of people who are involved in sports growing up. I mean, some people might already have those skills, but for people who don't, they'll gather some of those skills that are necessary in, other aspects of life from playing sports, just from being around, learning how to sacrifice for a team, learning social skills, right? How to get along with others, how to get them to work for you and work with you. All those things are really important. Yeah, your dad, I think he retired young, right? And it's like early.
Correct.
That's got to be difficult because I mean, even guys who retire, late in their career, where they kind of could look back and reflect and say, "Hey, I played as much as I could." To have it like, shorten his career, shorten a little bit. Do you remember him struggling with that at all?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that question before, and I'll be honest, right? I remember, which I would have been 5 or 6. And I remember one Christmas, which would have been that first year after, or that first couple of months after, and I would have been too young to really know, like, tell you the story. But I remember it being a not in an ugly way, but I remember it being a darker Christmas. I remember my vision looking back on that was a darker time. I can only imagine that he did, right? And he's not the only one. He admired and of course played with, but he admired Pete Rose, and he said Pete Rose was without a doubt the hardest working man in baseball. And I don't think that's some breaking news, but I mean, but he Pete Rose played for the true love of the game, and so did Roger Metzger, and it's still to this day, which I don't know that I could talk the game with him, but just watching him go to a game, and he doesn't talk, he doesn't have anything to say. He doesn't. No one knows who he would be, whether we go to an Astros game or to a kid's little league game. He just sits and studies the game. And I think what you said is exactly right, is that it's that ones and zeros discipline and mathematics, I think even to baseball, that I think just intrigued his mind and his ability. And again, what I know, and probably not from him, but from his family, is that he's the type of guy that would be out there all day long taking ground balls from sun up to sundown, and would drive his uncles crazy because they'd be the ones having to hit the balls towards him, right? But I mean, it was just that discipline. And one of the things that he always said about the reason, of course, and again, the humility and the humble nature comes out, but he went to a small school in Austin, it's called St. Edward's. And St. Edward's, again, a very, very small private school, or I don't know if it's private, excuse me, but it's a smaller school. Um, Even though the Texas A&Ms and the UTs were available or out there, he knew he thought in his mind, if I go to a smaller school, then I'll have that playing time, right? And he says to this day, if I would have gone, him speaking, if I would have gone to Texas, or if I would have gone to one of the bigger schools, he said he doesn't think he would have ever been even scouted, because he most likely wouldn't have been playing. And whether that's true or not, or him just being humble, that's the way he looked at his life, and still does. I mean, he's plays a ton of golf now, but I mean, he's not going to go to the bar or to the hangout and talk about his career. That's not who he is. But the stats definitely speak for themselves.
It's funny because he reminds me of I've had John Stockton on a few times,
Wow.
and the second time I had him on with his co-host of his new podcast called The Ultimate Assist, great podcast, and it's funny. So I told him and his co-host to introduce themselves and give him a little bit of background, And John just goes, "Yeah, I grew up in a small little town. My dad owned a pub, and but fell in love with basketball, and then was looking to make a career out of it." And then we're laughing because we're like, "You are the most
You're
modest guy
you're the
I've ever."
guy,
I'm like, "Hey,
right?
how about you leave out the fact that you're on the dream team? You're on
Right.
you're the all-time assists leader still till this day, all-time steals, till this day." It's like, you're one of the greatest point guards that ever play the game. And he doesn't highlight any of it. And it's funny
Love
because
it.
it's like we always have this idea of like, don't meet your people that you're a fan of because
Correct. Correct.
you're going to be disappointed. And in many cases, I'm sure that's the case. But there are some people that no matter how popular or famous or how much they achieve, they stay grounded. And your
I love
dad
that.
sounds just like that.
I love that, and it is true. It is true, and that's I love that story. That's a good one, and that hits home right there. Exactly.
Yeah, do you think some of his upbringing had to do with that, like his parents
Oh
and
my gosh, sure. So that's goodness. That is what would it be? South of Austin, Fredericksburg. Just traditional roots, and of course my grandparents. I grew up. They were obviously alive when I was still. And humble, just great folks, and again and. You think about those things too, and I know that the perception out there is that all of the glitz and glamour of the sports industry came along in the probably 80s and 90s, but there is plenty of what I would consider quote temptation and different things out there that all that was very much there in the 70s as well, right? And the thing I think about my father is, and I say this very simply, but he always came home. He always came home, and I obviously mean that literally, but metaphorically as well. And again, I think that type of grounding, like you said, is very much embedded in who he was or is as a person. And now for me, again, as a kid back then, it's all the fancy stuff that you're like, right? That what is or what isn't, or what was or wasn't accomplished. But now looking back, it's like it's just the simple things. It's the family. It's taking care of just yourself, but your family, and just being authentic with who you are. And I do think those type of things translate to business as well. Because telling someone or a company or an individual or a team that whatever is may or may not be. I think that truth gets you a long way, and honesty gets you a long way, and true hard work and discipline and focus gets you a long way. And I think a lot of that translated into sports as well.
and did you ever get a chance to meet Pete Rose? Because I feel like he's been.
I have a picture.
Oh, really?
I have a picture. Yes, my brother and I again would have been five-ish, and it probably would have been out in. I'm just guessing because it was an outdoor. It wasn't in the Astrodome, so it's probably outdoors. So it most likely would have been in California. But yes, I do have a picture with my brother and I. Of course, we were kids,
Yeah, yeah.
and but I've certainly seen my father interact uh, with Nolan Ryan, of course, being in Houston, and they still live in that area. So, every once, not very often, but every once in a while, they'll go to the not Astrodome. Good Lord, Minute Maid, and it's not even called Minute Maid anymore, but the park, the new park in downtown Houston. I've seen them interact and talk about another humble gentleman. And those aren't conversations that I would even interject myself in, right? I mean, I'm away from the sidelines of my brother, but those two to watch them, and I've got a picture of them having a neat conversation, and it's just cool to watch, kind of like the fly on the wall, if you will, right? It's just cool to observe it, and not try to insert yourself in that, even though it's just one step away. Just kind of watch it, but yeah, it's definitely. I mean, you name it, right? I mean, Willie McCovey would have still been out in San Francisco at that time. Lee May would have still been out there, right? I mean, you name it from the 70s and 80s, and they were either playing together or opposing from that era, and that was a cool era, real cool era.
Yeah, I feel like Pete Rose. Did he ever get back in the Hall of Fame? They ever finally?
Oh gosh, isn't that just as of recent? I don't know that he ever. I don't know that any. And again, please don't get me doing sports. I'm not that good at it, but I know he. I think he just passed away, right?
Because I
But
know that was a big thing. A lot of my friends that were big baseball fans, they would talk about, and I mean, and just kind of looking into the story, I'm like, they're kind of cruel to the guy. Like, yeah, he messed up a little bit, but I'm like, the dude's one of the greats, and you're gonna keep him out of the Hall of Fame forever. And now every other day, sports betting,
yeah,
scandals are on
it's
TV, which is
in
nuts.
the headlines again, right? And certainly don't judge. I don't obviously don't know any of the details about the recent stuff either, and nor do I know exactly what Pete Rose was doing. I know the only thing I know is I think he had a quote once that he never bet against himself, which I would believe that. I would believe that, and I don't claim to know him. I obviously have a picture or two, and that's it, but don't know. But as my father said, and like he doesn't tell old war stories, right? You'd have to ask the questions to hear the stories. But one thing I do know is that he said he always admired Pete Rose. And there's a good picture. I can't think if it's Roger landing on Pete Rose's back or vice versa, but there's a good picture of the two of them as well in action at either what would have been, I guess, third base back then. So kind of cool to see or think about at least.
Yeah. Well, it's funny now to get back into the restaurant business.
Hmm.
There's a family there's something about a bond when you work together, on the field or in a restaurant. Like so I was a Portuguese immigrant, came to America when I was young. My
Love it.
parents are farmers from northern Portugal. Just always grew food and eating was always a big part of our lives. Like, I
Yep.
could get an F on a report card. My parents can handle that, but they could not handle me missing dinner. Like dinner was like a
Right.
line I do not cross. And as a
Right.
kid, I never really understood it. I'm just like, what's the big deal? Like heat it up when I get home. But like now as an adult and having my own family and my wife being Italian or whatnot, like
Nice.
eating together is always it's something that's super important to us. Like no matter what happens throughout the day, no, I'm like at the end of the day, we have to eat together. We open a bottle of wine, we
Love
eat
it.
together, and it's like you realize like okay, if we didn't have this little bit of time together, especially with our hectic lives. When would we have time to bond and communicate and talk and just hang out? And if we don't do that, then we're roommates, right? And that's kind of the beautiful thing about restaurants. It's like like once. Well, we used to do it more. It used to be like once a month, but now we try to do it every couple of months. We'll get a couple buddies together. We'll go out to eat, or we'll get other friends that have kids around the same age. We'll go out to eat, and it's like that eating together and drinking together. Like it always seems like you have your most bonding moments and your best conversations and your biggest laughs and you tell your most intimate stories like during that time together eating
Absolutely.
and you think about it like before there was technology, before there was video games and all that stuff, like the most pleasurable thing we had in life and the thing we look forward to was probably after we're done hunting and gathering, we sat around that fire and we ate together. So it's like
Yep.
probably so deep rooted in our DNA. And is that what like, is any of the things I'm talking about like some of the things that attracted you to the industry?
That's a great thing. I would say for sure, right? And I think for everybody out there, whether it's community or family or whatever the case is, especially with the brand I'm with Norma's the brand I'm with here in Dallas. I mean, you're talking. We've been serving people since 1956, right? I mean, literally, the doors have been open since being in Dallas. I mean, before the Kennedy assassination. I mean, you're talking about some real, true Dallas history. And I'll tell you one of the stories, and this is a call I took probably within the first year of me being with the company, and it was this frail voice, and she called here to our office, and she described herself as an African American lady. I think she said referencing herself, and but she was clearly an older lady, and she told me a story about Dallas in the 50s. And again, not to get into this too much, but I mean, it took a moment for the South to come around, and she said that a lot of the restaurants in the Dallas area at that time and surrounding areas were still somewhat segregated or still made it known that people should be sitting in one spot or the other. But the Norma was a real person. Norma was a real lady back then. And she called to tell me that how she loved that Norma never cared where she sat in that restaurant, right? And she said, in being a at that time, a young African American woman in South Dallas and being able to go into the cafe and sit wherever she wanted, that sat with her. I mean, she's telling me the story, what, 40 years later, right? And I mean, that says something. So you talk about the epitome of community. and heart and passion. And I think in some ways, that's what people love. But at the same time, I think that's also can be a double-edged sword because I think that's also why people invest in them, right? And whether it's a bar, everyone, you make a little money, and people want their own bar. They want their own. You mentioned Italian with your wife. They want that Italian restaurant. They want that feel. They want to walk in and be that. And the tricky part about it is the margins on the business are so tricky, right? That you better know what you're doing. And so it is, it's that double edge where it's the community, it's the love, it's the family, it's the friends. But man, if you're going to get into it, you certainly better know what you're doing because it can come around like, as I say in my meetings to my guys, it comes around like a pet cobra. And if you don't pay attention to it, it will be right on your neck before you know it. And I hate to take that from such an emotional moment to a very real moment, but that's what, part of my career was doing multi-unit with franchisees across the country, and you see some wonderful and fantastic success stories, but you also see some folks that I've seen some fortunes go down the drain because they thought that they could just own it, buy it. Okay, I'll buy it. My kid doesn't get a job out of college. All right, I'll buy you a $3 million sports bar. Good luck, right? And seeing that take some fortunes down. And so, it's a cool business, but it's elusive because if you don't know how to manage it right, it'd be like me and you going and trying to practice law, or oh, well, let's go down to the hospital today and we'll go operate, right? It's a very sophisticated business that if you don't know how to do it, you can like find yourself in trouble quick.
Oh, without a doubt. I forget what percentage of restaurants fail within like the first couple of years, but it's like some ridiculous.
95 to 98, I think is the number.
Yes. Yeah.
Was
I
that
mean,
quick enough for you?
it's insane when you really think about it. Like, why would anybody like your chances of succeeding are so low? But I think that it is something about the love of
Truth.
the community, you know, uh, my wife, it's funny because when I first started dating her, she was already in the restaurant business and she's always been involved in restaurants. And like
Love it.
another side of her came out when she was like, when I first time I saw her behind a bar or I saw her being a waitress, I'm just like, she's like busting balls with the customer. She's like, yeah, a sense of humor. Like, what is going on here? Like,
Right, right.
and she was just like at home and she was making them happy and they all, customers would come up to me like, I love your wife, she's awesome,
Love
or
it.
and you're just, and then you remember like your favorite places going out to eat, growing up. It's like, oh, just like that's the thing I try to tell people too. I'm like, you have to remember like that restaurant is that time away from their stress. You know what I mean? Like that's their
Absolutely.
it's a special place. It's a special moment because it's like whatever stresses they're dealing with in life, like that might be their date night of the year, that one date night they have a year. It might be celebrating a big basketball win with the kids or a
Yep.
soccer win, a championship, whatever. And it's like you're going there, it's like your time to just enjoy, food and company and laugh and be away from everything else. And it really is like I think sometimes because it's funny because my wife will always say she's like I am so many people's therapist and I'm like
Yeah,
she's like people will
it's the
just tell me
truth.
their whole life story, and I'm like, yeah, but and we would talk about this. I'm like, yeah, I'm like that you probably are those ears that they don't have in their lives. Somebody who will listen, or that's their comfort spot. They're at a bar, nobody's gonna
Yep.
judge them. They're and it's like so. There's all these like amazing special things about a restaurant, and then you also see the bond within the people who work there, right? Because it's like you spend so much time together and so much, so many things can go wrong throughout a night.
Second family.
Yeah, and it could be so chaotic. And I always say like the ups and downs brings a family together. And when you're in a restaurant business, there's a lot of downs. Like her boss Tony, who owns the Villa Rose, and he's one of the things that he's the best at is no matter how bad things get throughout a night, like things will go break or whatever. Like he just makes every customer feel like he'll figure it out. And I remember I had
That's a talent.
yeah,
That is a talent.
and he'd always. I remember he a buddy of mine who got married at the restaurant, and he's like, dude, he's like, everything was going wrong at our wedding. He's like everything. He's like the cake wasn't ready. He's like they had the wrong date or something, and he's like all Tony kept telling me is like. go have fun. I'll take care of the rest.
Love
And
it.
it's like, and he has. I'm like, I always tell Tony, I'm like, you have that problem, and that's the thing, like about owning a business and being in, especially in a restaurant business, is like so many things can go wrong. Your problem solving skills have to be at another level. Like you can't just be a
Unbelievable.
robot, you know.
Unbelievable. It's I think someone told me once, it's not that things aren't going to go wrong. You just got to make it look easy, right? I mean, you got to make it look simple. Um, no, but you're spot on. And like, whether it's an event or a bar or a restaurant and and the guest or potential owner or someone that desires to be in it, it's like when you feel that energy, when it's humming on all 12 cylinders, I mean, there's not a better feeling. And as a guest, that's intriguing, and as a potential investor, owner, operator, whatever, that's intriguing. And yeah, for sure, it's a fun crazy, that's for sure.
Was there a type of restaurant or food or anything that like your personal preference that you really like or want to get involved in?
So you mentioned Italian. I've got some Italian blood and my stream. That's definitely between my wife and I. That's one of our favorites. I do love what we're doing, which is just that good old traditional Southern comfort food. And it's so cool too because you do see it kind of still really truly bring the generations together, right? And no matter what trends or fad diets are out there, I mean, it's so neat to see every walk of life, every age group connecting over what would be just traditional Southern style food. But I'm wide open. I love to see, especially in this market. I just love to see restaurants being successful. We were lucky enough to on Saturday night. Speaking of date night, we with my wife we went out and there's just this new little restaurant up by our home and you just never know, right? But they were humming. They were so busy and you just feels like. And I think I'm assuming this guy was the owner. He was buzzing around like you mentioned, and I'm like, God, I hope he wins. You just really out of that out of the atmosphere, if you will. And once you're there, you can make it. And there's nothing better. But no, I think the biggest thing for me, and this goes across all lines. I don't care if it's getting a soda at the convenience store. What I'm preaching to my teams these days is just the absolute and unequivocal appreciation for everyone that you are serving. And I know that sounds cliche, but it is truer now, more now than ever, in my opinion. And I was doing a couple of months ago one of the meetings for my team, and we were talking through what the current guest expectation is. And I want to say, without exaggerating, food quality was number 3 or 4 on their list. It was appreciation, wanting to feel like home, wanting to feel welcome, were all the top 2 and 3 things of just gratitude that I'm there. Before, oh yeah, and by the way, good food too sounds good, right? But I mean, it's just being welcomed when you're walking through the door. Thank you for the business. Thank you, because I mean, again, for all of us, right? Whether a person's in a good financial position or maybe struggling a little bit, the dollar doesn't go as far as it did before, and I don't know what's going to bring that back if it ever comes back. But if someone's taken the time to come and use your business, it's just, in my opinion, if someone's taken the time to say thank you to me, I'm going to use them again. Food was good, but guess what? They were nice, so we're going to go back and use them again. That's my that's my favorite aspect to anyone's business, frankly.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is when money does get tight, the one of the first places they cut corners with, spending is going out to eat. You guys get hit
Absolutely.
really hard.
And I think for Texas, and I'm probably throughout the country, but I know specifically in Texas, I mean, that's a struggle right now, and so again, and I've always said this as well. I would use the airline industry as an example back in the day, but I would use 2 different airlines and say that plane for the most part is still coming from Seattle. How does it feel? The energy getting on this one feels it's totally different and welcoming, where that exact same plane under a different brand is dark, cold, and not inviting, right? Well, the same thing goes for the restaurant business. There's only so many food providers. It's the same truck, right? What are you doing with that food? But then more importantly, or equally important, is how well we're taking care of each and every guest that walks through that door and treating them like friends, treating them like family. And we've all walked into both of those scenarios where you're like, ooh, man, I don't know about this place, and you can just feel it. And then the same thing you can feel when they're taking care of you from the get-go, right? When you walk in that door, and that is how, in my opinion, you become or a person becomes successful in this industry.
Well, it's funny you say that because you know I'm one of those people that I'll always go to a restaurant more than once. Like if I have a bad experience, I'm like, you never know what happened behind the scenes. The chef could have got sick, arrested. Who knows? Like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
the restaurant business is pretty crazy.
It's true. So that
So, you know,
sounds about right.
I always give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, hey, we'll try one more time. But one thing that you said is like very important is like, even if the food isn't my favorite, if I have fun there, if feel like I enjoyed it, I will come
Absolutely.
back no matter what. But if the food's phenomenal,
Absolutely.
but the service kind of sucked, I didn't really like the vibe, the feeling of the place, I'm like, I won't return because, so it's like,
Yep.
you're right. I mean, it sounds kind of weird to say out loud, like, hey, food's not the top priority when you're going out to eat, but
Crazy.
yeah, right.
But yeah, it's unbelievable. And maybe that's, and again, maybe it's different generations, whatever the case is, but something to be said about just good old customer service. And that's the truth.
Well, it's smiling and being like just inviting is it goes a long way. Just having people who are like you said, it like just brings good energy because I think energy is
Absolutely it does.
contagious, right? I always talk about this. The show's called The Ripple Effect. There's a lot of different metaphors I use that in, but one of them is in the idea of like good or good energy or negative energy. Positive energy, negative energy. Like if
1000%.
if my wife calls me and she's in a bad mood, then my next interaction with the next person is probably going to be negative, and then their interaction with the next person, because I've just keep started this ripple effect of negative energy. Where if somebody calls me and they're in a great mood, they maybe get me to laugh, or you have certain friends, right, certain people in your life that like every time you hang out with them, they're just always positive. All of a sudden,
Yes.
that's why we kind of are attracted to those people. The people you like to hang out with, the people who are always bringing good energy. And in any business, if it's a gym, you walk in, the whoever's at the front desk is smiling in a good mood. If it's a restaurant, like that goes a long way. Just having somebody who brings that positive energy, and you can't really quantify it. You can't really sometimes even explain it, right? You meet somebody.
100%.
You're like you meet somebody and you're like, what, this person has, like, I like their energy, and you're like, what do we even meaning when we say that? But it's like you can't explain it, but it's there, you feel it.
1000% completely agree. And it's funny because even I've with in my career, as I said, I've seen some people, unfortunately have to shut their doors or whatever the case was. And remember an operator that probably didn't take it as seriously as he should, and wasn't overly, say loving of the community or his team or whatever the case was. And after closing that venue, you walk into an empty building and you can still feel the absence of positivity, right? To put it even lightly, I mean, you can still feel it, and it's an empty building. So 1000% that vibe is definitely a real deal.
Have you ever watched the series Black Rabbit?
No, but tell me, I'm
Oh,
curious.
we just started watching it, and it's funny because I'm like, I was telling my wife, I'm like, this must be more interesting to you than me because it's about not that it's not interesting, but it's about a restaurant owner, and what's the guy Bateman from
Oh,
Ozark, he's in it,
okay.
and they have a lot
Well,
of
I have to because he's one of my
oh, it's
favorites.
it's so good. Like even if you're not involved in restaurant business, it's like a really really good show. It's just fascinating all the like just seeing all how all the business aspect of it, the all the behind the scenes stuff of just trying to present this beautiful food and a good present, and then all the
Yes.
stuff going on behind the scenes with people like not getting along and butting heads, and
Yeah.
which and just hearing from my wife's stories, I'm like, this is pretty close to reality in some cases, and but it's a really good show. So I was just wondering it,
I'll have to check that out. And I love him. He's one of my favorite actors, so we'll definitely check it out. But it's funny because what you're saying is true. It's for whatever reason, it's people are very passionate about their food. I'm talking about from the customer side, right? I mean, they're very. It needs to be there, accurate, on time, the way I wanted it, right? And there's a lot of emotion in that, right? It's the Gordon Ramsay effect. I mean, it is that intense sometimes, and so yeah, that's interesting. We'll definitely check that out for sure.
Well, it's funny because Portuguese people, I always say the only things they're passionate about is soccer and food. Like you could talk, like we could get together with Portuguese people. They don't like you could talk politics. They're not that passionate about it. They're just like I can take it or leave it. Like you could talk about the most controversial things. It doesn't. But if they go anywhere, like this is always a joke in like the port. Like I live in a Portuguese community, and it's like no matter where they go, it could be a wedding, it could be a Jack and Jill, a stag, it could be a fundraiser, it could be the only thing they ever talk about is the food, and they'll
That's
just critique
hilarious.
the crap out of the food, and they're like, oh, they should have. This was too cold, or that should have been done like this, or this should, And I'm just like, they're so. But like you said, like it's there's people. Some people are so passionate about the food, and that's also why I think like women love cooking, right? It's a lot of work and you can mess it up and it's a lot of work to feed a lot of, but like the enjoyment of like feeding people, like there's something beautiful
Something
about
to it.
people and seeing them enjoy your hard work. Like there's something beautiful about that.
Absolutely. That's hilarious. I like that. Those are good priorities. I think I'd like that Portuguese philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. Do you are you a cooker yourself, or does your wife does the cooking, or?
So we actually, and like you said, we live a pretty busy life. I've got three grown adult children, but then we have a little baby at home as well. So we are on the same hustle you guys might be, right? Where it's like, oh, we get 15 minutes to ourselves or to have a conversation. So I would say that I guess I do the cooking, but there's nothing too fancy going on at home. I'm sure that your wife would agree, right? Where it's like it's almost like you become this different person when you're out in the public doing your thing. Like you said, she turns it on when she needs to turn it on in that environment, and then you get home and you're just this recluse,
No, you're
or you
right.
just kind of shut it down and
I
and
I try to sympathize with her with that because it's like sometimes I see her at work. I'm like, wow, you're more like I said, like oh, you're funnier and more
right.
outgoing here than you are. But then it's like you can dump out, all the funny you have in you during the day, and then like by the time you get home, you're just exhausted and you just want to,
Yes.
yeah,
Well, I always say too, right? And here in Dallas, whether it's Cowboys or Rangers or whatever, it's like I could be given free tickets, free parking, shuttle me out there, and just a crowd of people. Like, that's I'm like I might decline just because you're always with people, you're always around people, and not that I don't love them, but it's like you kind of want that moment where you can just turn it off and reset for the next day, I guess.
yeah. No, life's the balance. Like I'm the same way. I mean, I started a podcast. People always joke. I started a pod. Well, they joke, and it's true. Like they started a podcast because I like talking and I like conversation. But it is one of those things where like as much as I think some people who don't know me personally wouldn't know how much I also love my alone time. Like
Yeah.
I love, and I always say like, and this, it's one of those things where it's like, we don't realize the power of like leisure time. Like your best ideas come to you, your best, self-reflecting, your best
Sure.
analyzing your life and the world around you comes when you're not distracted. And that's why, like, when I was writing music and playing music, I would, so my best writing would be late at night, right? I remember dating my wife, and at the time I was like involved with writing some EP, and she would be like, "Hey, let's go out," and I'm like, "Dude, I'm so like focused right now," and it would be like 8 o'clock at night. She's texting me, "Oh, let's go out," or and I'm just like, I'm so focused, and like I'm like, "Oh, it's 8 o'clock at night. Everybody's gonna be out. Nobody's gonna be text messaging me." I'm like, I get quietness, and
Yes.
and it's when I get to focus, and also when I'm at the gym or whatever I'm doing, it's like that alone time is sometimes when I'm like, oh, that's a great idea, or I should do this, or I should do that, and or I should try this or whatever. And so yeah, that downtime is especially if you're running a business or whatever, like I'm sure you probably agree with that, right? Your best ideas are when you find that little bit of time that you're
Sure.
not distracted, you can kind of just wander a little bit.
Sure. And like and I'm thinking I've got to believe it. I know there's people a thousand times busier than me, but you want to be available when your teams are when you're open for business. And we start the day we open our doors at 7 a.m. And now, granted, we're being a cafe, we close a little earlier than some locations, but we close at 8. But I mean, you need to be on, right? And if your teams are at their work 5:36 in the morning and they've got questions, they want to talk to somebody, right? And so being available, I think in this particular in the restaurant business, I think is smart and wise to help them navigate things. So that's a pretty decent stretch to quote beyond. So yes, anytime where you can kind of just turn it off for a minute is not bad. But it's the people business, and again, whether it's a convenience store, a local bar, or a global restaurant, I think remembering that is incredibly important for anyone that wants to be successful in that arena for sure.
With during COVID, a lot Joe Rogan went to Texas. A lot of other,
Hmm.
famous celebrities and whatnot went to Texas. Did that help a bit? I would assume that, like, obviously traffic and whatnot. Do you think that helped, that extra popularity of the state and whatnot might have helped some of those mom and pop businesses stay alive during COVID?
I think without a doubt, right? And I mean, it certainly helped property value on homes. I mean, that's for sure, right? And I think that everyone, and I'm sure there's strong opinions both ways about Texas, but it's if you've spent time here, it's a great place, and it is very pro business, right? I still think that's kind of just politics aside, part of the Texas spirit is we find a way to figure it out. But it was if it and it was tough here. I mean, it was very tough here, and I can only imagine. And I do know people or have friends, and certainly pay attention to folks in other parts of the country, and don't envy what some of the people had to do. But because I know they have just as much go get 'em spirit as others. And but yeah, I do. I'm glad that they're here. And whether it's Joe Rogan or watching the Tesla type companies and move into town. I mean, we're a pro business state. And yeah, of course it's a good deal. And we look at it just on the surface, and we hope they enjoy what we have to offer. And I'm sure, I've got to believe I'm not the only, and it's not, I don't own the business, but I do manage it. And I've got to believe that we're not the only owners that would think that same way of, hope they enjoy it and want to be a part of it. And that's how it feels post COVID, but definitely still slinging it out, if you will, right? I mean, I don't know if normal ever comes back. What is normal now these days? And do we just become bigger and faster stick and movers, if you will, right? And do we just move, we move quicker and shift how we have to make things make sense. But yeah, definitely there was that migration, if you will, and we're still alive and kicking, so I guess we did just fine with it.
Yeah, it was like living in Massachusetts throughout that time. I mean, we would go to Florida and see, spend some time with my wife's family because we were striving for something normal, and Florida seemed to be the closest, most normal place we could go to at the time. But a lot of like mom and pop places locally, I mean, I forget what percentage of them shut down. I mean, it was some ridiculous high percentage. I mean, they made it almost impossible for restaurants to stay open. I mean, it
Yeah,
almost seemed like a strategy to force feed people big box stores and chain restaurants. And because I think prior to COVID, there was a trend where you started to see people, they're like, hey, if I'm going to spend money, I'm going to spend money locally. Like
sure.
a restaurant that like the owner's there, and the family's there, and they're going to
Yeah,
spend money back in our community. They're going to spend money, they're a part of the community, and that trend was like kind of going in that direction where people were more conscious of that. And then COVID happened and it kind of like, you know, I shouldn't say stop that, but it definitely uh slowed down that kind of, well, it slowed down because just those mom and pop restaurants are not even available anymore. A lot of them aren't even around.
correct.
And then it's like, how do you compete with these big box stores that or these big, chain restaurants that sell stuff way cheaper or, and whatnot. And some people are just like, hey, if I'm gonna go out to eat, it's cheaper to go to the chain restaurant than it is the mom and pop place. That's what they assume, but a lot of times they're not, And restaurants like one of the hardest places to make money, like some of the reasons you
Even in
talk
a
about.
good economy. Yeah, even
Yeah,
when things are good.
yeah,
And I think you had a good point too, right? Because that's part of the American spirit. I think we all have, I mean, you mentioned your podcast, right? It came from somewhere and it was something you wanted to go do. And I think that's the beauty of it. And yeah, some of them, some of those, the guys and girls and families, I should say is probably a better way, that made it. Those lessons, if you can survive them, are invaluable. If you can survive them. And there's not a more beautiful place than New England. I mean, I absolutely love it up there, and don't know enough about the local politics to know what was done or what wasn't done. But I hope that American spirit never dies because that's what gets folks out of bed and it's like I'm not going to work for this guy or this company anymore. I'm going to go do it myself, and that's the coolest thing about it. And whether it's the restaurant business or a podcast or anywhere in between, the desire to go and try. And some people moved halfway across the country or completely across the country to try it somewhere else, and that really speaks volumes. And it does feel like we're still in that wake of whatever everyone's own personal experience was with COVID. But sometimes that difficulty sharpens the knife, if you will, and you come out of it better as an individual. You come out. There's businesses that have also thrived positively because of what they learned or what they experienced during those times. And that's it's people's home businesses that are like, I never would have done this if it wasn't for COVID. Well, what a cool story. So there's different ways to look at it, but definitely I see where you're coming from, and just hope that we don't ever, in the big picture, lose that American spirit to go out and try it ourselves at least once, because there's nothing better.
Yeah, there's a lot of places that have now outdoor seating thanks to COVID. Because
Absolutely.
and in New England, that's kind of a big deal because our summers are so short. Like the next thing you know, right around the corner, here comes the cold. So
Right.
it's like in the summer, anytime you can, justify being outside for any reason, it's awesome. So like people, I think for the businesses that survived, maybe forcing them to do outdoor seating, maybe it was a plan in the
You never
future.
know.
Yeah, they might have never gotten around to doing it, and now like just about every place has outdoor seating due to it. So yeah, well, without a doubt, it's yeah. I mean, you think about it. Like I had one of my cousins owned a restaurant, and I remember them telling me once, they're like, "Dude, it's like I'll own a bar again." He's like, "A restaurant is so difficult to balance." Uh, and the reason, and I asked him like, why? Why? What's the big difference? Yeah, obviously, there's some differences, but I'm like, well, from his perspective, his experience, like, what was the big difference? And he's like, you order food, and he's like, if you don't sell it, it goes bad. If you don't
Yeah.
have it, then people complain, right? So it's like you
Yeah.
have to have it, and so it's like he's like a bar. He's like that Jack Daniels or that Woodford Reserve or that Angel's Envy is going to taste the same no matter where you go. He's like,
Might
so
get a little
people.
better if it's there longer, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's aged, right? And so and you're right. Like people are passionate about their food too. So it's like the way your chef makes the food or the way your restaurant makes the food might not be the way they like it, right? So
Right.
they'll say, "Oh, that's not made correctly," because they have a different interpretation on the way it should be made or whatever. And people are so picky with their food. It's like to create a menu and then try to make everybody happy. I mean, and the thing about now more than ever, everybody has an opinion and everybody wants to share their
Sure.
opinion. So like keeping those Yelp reviews positive cannot be easy.
Oh man, yeah, and you mentioned some really a lot of really great things there too, and I can only imagine. And again, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've got to believe, like in the bar industry up there, I mean, I've got to assume it's local pubs. I got to assume that's those, really where it's the same faces, the same people, the same bartenders, the same call it cocktail waitresses, whatever. And it goes back to what we started with, which is it's that customer service that gets them coming in there. I dare say every day, a couple times a week. And you're right. It's pretty fascinating to see, and so the same thing goes down here. It's like, even in the bar business, where it could be a tricked out, super sophisticated, great looking place, but it may or may not make it. But then here's the local call it dive or the local pub or local hangout that's still there for same thing 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and it's really cool to see. But definitely for sure, I've never owned a bar. I know the margins are much better than the restaurant business, but it's certainly, I'm sure it goes quite well for them, or hope it is in the future if they ever decide to go down that path again.
Yeah, and a bar very similar to a restaurant. It's like, they probably more important than how well you mix your drink. It's like how's that customer service, or
Yep. Do they know my name, right? I mean, the second, and again, it's I've always said it this way. It's the sixth sense of the business, and the guest may or may not know that they have it, but the guest has it, right? And they may not be able to say, well, the lighting's off, or the music's off, or they don't know my name, or they forgot my drink, or they messed up this. But all those little details are programmed in our brain as a consumer, right? And if a place is hitting on those cylinders, right, hitting on all those cylinders, you and I used the little place we went to the other night as an example. It's this little hole in the wall place. And I just got up to walk my son around for a second, and I had three people come up and say, "Can we get you anything? Can I help you with that?" And I'm now here I am telling you this, right? And it's like that spoke to me, right? Just as a guy, like, no, we're good. But three people took the time to do that. And that's important, and you look at, and again, not speaking to your area specifically, but I'm watching some of these local, smaller brands in the coffee industry really kind of start to dominate over the big, I call it the bigger guys, like the Starbucks, if you will. And the coffee to me tastes the same, but I know they're friendlier, right? And I can see in you mentioned Yelp reviews and the ratings, I can see in the reviews what guests are appreciating more, and it goes right back to what we've been talking about here now for a bit of time is guest service.
Yeah, well, without a doubt, there's a lot of coffee spots in Massachusetts, little mom and pop coffee spots, and like theme you'll see is that they don't use any big name brand stuff, like
Yeah,
everything, the waters, the bottled waters to the juices to, the snacks, everything seems to be local. And
yep.
people go in there and they like it because they're like, oh, all this stuff is like it's local and there's
It's
probably
somebody that, yeah,
love and effort and energy went into this, instead of everything just like you said being a Starbucks and and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, people do appreciate those things. People appreciate, knowing that people put a little extra love and work and energy into and care into the products that they're spending money on. And when, like you said, when the economy's tough and the dollar doesn't go as far, like, you really have to think hard about where you're going to spend it. And you want to spend
absolutely.
it, you want to spend it somewhere where it's, you feel like it's appreciated. And that again, and it just giving that appreciation back, like, hey, we do appreciate you picking us to be the place where you spend your money. Like that goes a long way.
And like you said, that's in this conversation, that is the ripple effect, right? I mean, that's the energy, and that's the reciprocation of the business alliance between the guest and the owner, or the guest and the company. And that's completely true.
Yeah, it's a cycle because it's like, we spend our money at your business and then spend your money at somebody else's business and it just everybody
Absolutely.
kind of helps each other. That's how the economy kind of works. And so it's like, yeah, we all need each other. We all need to support one another and we you need to, hopefully go out and support businesses and people that you like and you care about that, appreciate your business. And it like I said, it was unfortunate during COVID. It seemed like the world was almost force feeding people into the big box stores and whatnot, because I am one of those people that like, if I go anywhere new, I'm always like, where do you guys eat? Where's a little hole in
Yeah.
the wall place? I'm like, I want to go where you guys eat. I'm like, I don't want to
Right.
go
Right.
where you send the tourists. I'm like, I want to go to wherever the local mom and pop place is. And some of the best food and best conversations and best environments are those places where you go there and everybody looks at you because you're the only person that doesn't all know each other, and
You're the only one with the Red Sox hat on, right? I mean,
exactly, yeah. Yeah, which is awesome, and I love that. When people go to Portugal and they'll ask me, "Oh, where should I eat?" I'm like, "Hey, just find a little mom and pop place." I'm like, "Don't go to any, wherever the tourist tells you to go. Probably avoid that." I'm like, just because they'll try to feed you what they think you want, instead of like you eating what they eat, And I have friends from all over the world, and I would hang out with like my Latin American friends, like, "Hey, what do you guys eat? How oh, you drink this type of coffee? Let me try your coffee. Let me try, this,
wow, yeah.
um, and then when I hang out with my Mediterranean friends, my Lebanese friends, it's like, hey, we go to a Mediterranean restaurant. It's like, hey, what do you guys eat? I'm like, I don't want to eat what I typically eat. I want to eat whatever you guys eat. I'm like, and I'm very adventurous when it comes down to food. Like I'll try literally anything, and at least once. And if I don't love it, then I don't love it. But I'm like, I will.
Yeah.
'Cause
It was an experience.
yeah, because Portuguese people like we're kind of adventurous with foods. We have like a stew that is literally all the pieces of the pig that nobody else eats.
Oh
Like,
my.
yeah, it's like pig feet, ears, tongue, like all, and the reason why is because in northern Portugal, a lot of these farmers, like they didn't have a lot of money. They lived off the land. So they would never throw anything out. Till this day,
Yeah.
my mom doesn't throw anything out. Like if she sees me throw out food, even if it's just a little bit, she's like, she has animals in the backyard. So she'll be like, I could have fed the chickens. What are you doing throwing this out? It's like, I'm like, Mom, it's like a half of a slice of a pizza. It's like,
Right.
um, so like they have that
It's a
mentality.
crust.
Yeah. So exact basically, and she would still get mad at me. Like my wife and I will like hide like leftover food that we're throwing out because my mom will like, but they grew up in that mentality, like,
Different
nothing
era. Yep.
nothing goes to waste. And I think some of it is what made them creative with, in the kitchen is because they would find things, ways of making something that maybe typically people don't eat or wouldn't like to eat. They make it, good. Like my wife was never big into pork. She's like, when I grew up, pork was always boring and plain. Portuguese people have like 1,000 different ways of making pork, and just about all of them are delicious. Like they're really good at like marinating it. They have this, this pork dish called fibras, and it's like they marinate for like 48 hours in alcohol and salt and all that, and wine or whatever. And it's like you eat it and you're like, wow, this isn't boring and plain at all, and it's like it was out of necessity because it's like, okay, we don't
Sure.
have
That's
a
all
lot
they
of time.
had.
Yeah, so it's like we have to find a way to like if we're gonna eat this every day, how do we
We got
find a
booze and
way?
pork. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, my dad makes wine. He makes, 180 gallons every year and usually all gone, but very similar to eating and food and cooking for people. Like people go to my parents' house and they love trying my dad's wine because they know that he made it, right? He put in some love and effort and energy
Love it.
and then I remember growing up, like I would always say this. I'm like, Dad, like wine's not that expensive. Like, why are you spending so much time and energy making it? And then if it doesn't come out good, like there's a lot of risk too, you spend all this time, energy, and money, and then it doesn't even come out good. And, I just didn't get why he would do it. And then, like, as I got older, I started realizing, like, okay, when it was time to make wine, like, he was excited, like, oh, the grapes are here. We can
Yeah.
go buy the grapes. And then he'd have friends over and family over, and they would be crushing the grapes, and there'd be flies everywhere, which is funny because
Sure.
I used to hate it as a kid, and now like I kind of miss it. Like and and there's fruit flies everywhere, and people were over and they're cutting cheese and drinking wine while they're making wine, and I'm like, oh, I get it. I'm like, this just it's a reason to bring people together. It's
Yes.
food, it's alcohol, it's and all my friends, like I have a lot of foreigner friends. And like if they're Polish, if they're, El Salvadorian, if they're wherever Estonian, I have Estonian friends, like wherever they're from, like the one thing we all have in common is that like they Guatemalan, like we all eat and drink together. Like
Love
they
it.
love that. Like that's the one thing that all the foreigners and that's kind of the thing about America that I always say, like we're a melting pot, but I'm like everything's so melted that there's no culture anymore. And
Yeah.
I get kind of
Right.
lost a little bit, where it's like people are so, and I think a little bit too is like we're so caught up in the journey sometimes. Like I saw with my parents sometimes where like they were so caught up in the journey of like, hey, we took this giant risk to come to a foreign country to get ahead financially that it becomes like, your sole goal or
Priority.
purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and priority where you end up losing the fact that like I remember telling my parents, I'm like, listen, because I remember one time I was a kid, I was arguing with my mother about something, and she's like, oh, do you understand the risk I took to come to America to give you a better life? I'm like, you're right. But and then I told her, I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Every time we go to Portugal in the summer to visit, I'm like, they still live on a farm and they still seem just as happy and maybe even happier than us. And then she looked at me and she's like, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, all these material things are great, but I'm like, damn, I'm like, I think if you have community and if you stayed there, you would have been just as happy,
Wow.
and that was kind of one of the things I learned from their journey.
That's deep. That's real deep. Well, I'll tell you, your mother's got the one up on the ultimate guilt trip, right? Do you see all the risk I
Yeah,
put
I
out
know.
there? She could,
I know.
that's an ace card right there.
Yeah, I can't really win. I mean, I did feel guilty even saying that. I'm like, well, from their perspective, they were doing what they thought was the best thing to do. They're in Europe and everybody and Italian, same thing. A lot of Italians that
Sure.
came here, Polish, Eastern Europeans, Latin Americans, like they come here because they hear that hey, America's a place of opportunity, like you said, like all these it's a place where you can open a restaurant, open a bar, and if you work your ass off you can succeed in something,
Amen.
and they
Right.
come here to chase that dream. So but
I think that's the beautiful thing about it too, right? And like as and candidly, right? We didn't even know what we would start talking about when we first got on, and what a cool thing, to sit and talk about. It's still the place you can do that, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. This is what I tell my children, and they're growing up in a very, I would say, with all due respect, to the call it 16 to 20 some odd year old kids. I mean, they're growing up in a very unique time where they got a lot at their hands. I mean, they've got a lot they don't think they realize, but you can still make it here. You can work hard. You can make it. Anything is possible. It's a crazy little country that we live in, and there's a lot of opinions on both sides. But man, like you said, I kind of get along with everybody. Sounds like you kind of get along with everybody. And the people in my community kind of all get along together, kind of all enjoy each other's company. You know, the people at our cafe is every walk of life, from CEO to janitor, and they all sit down all within inches of each other and all enjoy the same things. And you know, when you blend those things and you still live in a spot where you can go open a business, you can go start a podcast, you can go to this college, you can go do this. That's a pretty cool place to be. And so whatever that's worth, you know, it's certainly a pleasure to discuss. I don't know how we got there, but I'm glad we did.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I don't want to take up much more of your time, but there was one quick story I wanted to share with you and the
Sure.
listeners. Like, so back in the day, I had Mariana Van Zeller on. She's a documentary filmmaker and journalist. She's actually from Portugal, and she had a show or a bunch of work done on Discovery Channel and Nat Geo. She recently was on Joe Rogan again for the second time, and she did a documentary called Oxycontin Express, which really like
Mm,
blew open that whole story and what
wow.
just the tragic things that were going on there with just them giving it out like candy and why
Man.
and who was
Yeah.
profiting and all that stuff. But she also had another show that was kind of and she has another show called Trafficked that I think they just did a final season. They did tons of seasons of it. She's phenomenal. But she had a show that kind of went under the radar that I think some people kind of forgot about called Breaking Borders, and it was a really interesting show, and it was fascinating because what she would do, talking about like being at a restaurant or a cafe, and it doesn't matter
Hmm.
what your political views are, whatever, you can all enjoy each other. What she did, she would get two people that typically would not get along, right? She would get like a super conservative Texan and like a legal a Mexican, right?
Sure.
And she had a famous chef who was a friend of hers, like this, like just amazing chef. And what he would do is that they would get these two people together and they would say, "Hey, we're gonna just create this beautiful cuisine for you, this beautiful dinner for you. Like we're gonna have all these amazing foods from your culture or whatever, made up by one of the best chefs in the world. You're gonna love it." The only thing to add to that is that you're gonna have to enjoy it with somebody you don't typically get along with. And so they would sit like this Texan, like super conservative, like old school
Sure.
Texan, and this like Mexican immigrant. They did it with like a Israeli and a Palestinian. They did it with like all, and they would sit, and it's funny, like everybody got along, and
Love
and
it.
there would be times where they would like butt heads once, but they would just sit down and just like, hey, talk and enjoy the food, and until they kind of got to those topics that were a little bit more heated. And they would enjoy each other, and then sometimes they would butt heads, but then they would laugh again because they're
Yeah.
eating and enjoy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, even some of the greatest, disagreements we have in the world, like if you sit down with somebody you think you disagree with and you enjoyed some food or a coffee, like, hey, let's go out and have a nice glass of coffee or a cup of coffee or a nice glass of wine or whatever, like it can really help people get along, and
Completely
unfortunately, like
agree.
most of our conflicts are online, so people, I think it's easier to be mean online than in person, but like so many people, it's like, hey, go out and have a glass of wine, go have a cup of coffee, sit down, enjoy whatever, a bagel at a really nice bagel shop, and enjoy like the simplicity of like, just something that was made by people who appreciate what they're making, and sit down and have a conversation face to face. And it's amazing how a enemy can quickly turn into a friend.
Completely agree. I love that. All over a nice meal, you know? All over a
Yeah.
nice meal. Love
Yeah.
it.
It was a great idea. I loved it because I'm like, nobody's really tapped into the power of like, eating and enjoying food together and whatnot, and really highlighted how like a lot of our issues could almost be resolved if if maybe they all grab dinner together,
Take a breath and have a dinner together.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Of
Well, and it humanizes people, right? And it's
course.
which I think we don't do enough of is I think we, and some of it's I shouldn't say some of it, a lot of it's the media's fault. Oh, always
I
demonizing
would agree with
people,
that.
demonizing people they don't get along with, instead of humanizing them and saying, hey, maybe we disagree, but let's try to figure out why we disagree, and the why is always the lost part of it. It's like, I like, you're probably good at picking out people's character or whatnot. I am one of those people that like wherever I am, I get along with everybody, and that's why this show has, I've had people on like Jim Brewer and Roger Stone, and and it's like people are always like, how do you get these people on? I'm like, I'm nice to everybody, and it's amazing if you're nice to everybody how far it goes. You know, like it's I've really throughout like my journey, I've just been always polite and nice and never had an agenda and any, you know, always open to wanting to hear people's stories and their background and extract some wisdom from their life experiences. And I think people appreciate that.
I do too. For the record, these people are all way too famous. I'm going to bore the hell out of your audience here, okay?
It's funny when I first no well again, those are some of my bigger names. I've done like 500 and something episodes. So, you know, but yeah, but like I was telling you before, some of my best conversations have been with people that is a friend of a friend, and they're like, "Hey, I got this guy. He's really interesting. Like, he'd love to be on your show." And you know, I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, he does seem kind of interesting. Let's have him on." And then next thing you know, we have you know, a 90-minute or 2 hour conversation about anything and everything, and it becomes one of the most fascinating you know, conversation. So this Dr. Jessica Rose, um, she's done a lot of interviews now, but one of the first interview, I think probably her first interview she ever done was on the show, and it was a mutual friend we had, Dr. James Lyons Wheeler, who was like, "Hey, you got to get Dr. Jessica Rose on. You got to get Dr. Jessica Rose on." I'm like, "Okay, okay. If you're recommending her, I'll have her on. I won't even think twice about it." So and then I ended up booking her, and I didn't know anything about her, and we started talking about like music, and we went into like the Terminator movie and AI, and I'm sure AI, that's probably another topic that's affecting your business. Is that?
Yes. Yeah, whole nother conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And when we went in that, and it was like the most fat. I'm like, wow, she's so fascinating. I'm like, I've never even heard of her. I'm like, you know, so it's like, and really, she wasn't, she didn't come from anybody famous. She didn't do anything like, you know, amazing or whatever. But she was just so fascinating, the way she looked at the world and the way she kind of, you know, used her life experiences to reflect on things and whatnot. So it's like, yeah, I mean, and who am I? I'm like, I'm not intriguing at all. You know, I'm just like, you know, I feel like you. I'm like I'm too famous to be talking to anybody who's even related to anybody famous. You know, I'm just a, you know, a nobody. So, you know, I'm not famous. Like, you know, I always have that imposter syndrome every time I'm on this show. I'm like, why is anybody
Maybe
listening?
that's why you're a success. Maybe that's why you're a success. That's a good place to be.
Yeah, awesome. But thank you, Kurt. I really, really appreciate your time.
What a
I know you took
pleasure.
up a lot of it. You know, like I don't have a lot of talents, but one of the talents I do have is I'm a curious person, and I use that curiosity to hopefully spark some, you know, some fun conversations, and hopefully I did that. And
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope I didn't put the audience to sleep, but thoroughly
no,
enjoyed
no, no, no,
it.
not at all. I mean, we're helping a lot of other people. You know, we're talking about our work and whatnot. Like, you know, the beautiful thing about podcasts and why I got into them is because there are a lot of people who are in the restaurant business. I see it all the time. Chefs with their earbuds in, listening to conversation to try, you know, a podcast or music to try to help get by through the day. And I think a lot of these conversations, you know, it is helpful for a lot of people to get through the, you know, the day and or you know, get through the car drive if they're, you know, if they're driving far commuting to work or whatnot. So you know, these conversations I think help a lot of people, and you know, I think there's something amazing about learning from other people's journeys and experiences, and everybody, no matter where you come from or who you are, like everybody has an interesting story and journey, and if you keep digging, like you'll find something really intriguing about just about everybody. So it's
Oh,
fun
I
to kind of
agree.
try to extract that from people. If there's any links you want in the show description, send them to me. If there's any, you know, anything, you know, if there's a headshot or a bio or anything you prefer for me to use, send it to me. I'll put it in the show description. And
Perfect. Yeah, probably just my LinkedIn will be fine.
oh, okay,
Which I'm
awesome.
happy to send your way. But yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, thank you. And at the show, you know, once it's up and live, I'll send you the links. And thanks, again. Maybe we'll talk again in the near future.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Well, thanks again. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Kurt. Hey, enjoy the
Thanks
rest
a
of
lot.
the day. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.